Hi, in this video I want to discuss how just because things are okay doesn't mean that they could have been better. Sort of like you think, okay, obviously I could have made a better choice. Things are okay now, but since things are okay and something good happened to me doesn't mean things could have been better, couldn't have been better, or couldn't have been worse. Obviously there's always that option, but the thing is that defies that idea is the fact that there's always there's no other option. Things were going to happen that way no matter what. Retrospectively speaking, like I mentioned before, once something's happened, that was the way it was going to happen. Sort of like the thought process of recognizing that, looking back, thinking that thought process is all a physical reaction that's happening in this universe that's deterministic, and it's something that's happening as a part of that deterministic universe. That's something that's predetermined. And that thought process is only a thought process. It's a projection onto the world based on our ideas of how things are going to work, and it's just a projection. It wasn't going to happen any other way. And that all that idea of another possible future, another possible future is just a perception. It's a projection. It's in your mind, and that mind is just a bunch of electricity and chemicals and brain matter, organ moving around, functioning in a certain way based on the physical material of the universe reacting with the physical material of the universe reacting a certain way based on a bunch of stimuluses that are happening to make us think a certain way based on our biology, working and functioning a certain way, and that's how it's meant to function. So that's how it's happening. So there's no other way something was going to happen once it's already happened. But the perception's still there, and it's still a psychological process, and it's something that you have to get used to, um, and recognizing that, yeah, just because things could have been a different way, there wasn't going to be any different way. And it's about, I guess, convincing you of that. I guess almost in a way of trying to convince myself that so you don't, I guess, regret something, right? Or you're not as guilty about something, or something like that along those lines. Whatever it may be, psychological kind of thing, I suppose, in many ways. Um, but yeah, just because that was the case, an option that you were considering choosing earlier, something could have happened. Disregarding any kind of multiple universes or infinite number of universes, depending on every single choice you make, this, that, and the other thing, regardless of any nonsensical ideas or any nonsensical theories, or disregarding all that, it doesn't mean that just as a psychological phenomenon, it doesn't mean that something couldn't have happened any better or any worse. It wasn't going to happen any other way, and it's already happened. It wasn't going to happen any other way beforehand, or the fact, looking back, it already happened, therefore it wasn't going to happen any other way. Doesn't mean before it happened that you couldn't have had a better outcome if you chose something else. Or it couldn't have been a worse outcome. It could have been any number of things. It doesn't really matter. It can have happened any number of ways. So it's something that exists um, as an idea, a psychological phenomenon of dealing with, I guess, a subconscious thought process that's letting us make sure we choose the best options, get the best outcomes. Obviously, that's part of the not part of the thing, but yeah, it's really just a psychological projection onto our previous experience. Now we can have thought something could have happened any differently. But then you realize something happened a certain way, or you missed something, or whatever it may be, and you realize that thing still happened a certain way, whatever circumstance, what you were going to do, in the same reality happened this way instead of that way. And not only your circumstance surrounding you, but where you were going to say go instead, have had its circumstance, and it wasn't going to happen any other way, everywhere the same way, based on a bunch of processes of cause and effect. Based on previous things happening, where you are now, something's going to happen in the future that's going to change. What's happening now is based on a past event because of cause and effect happening a certain way. Every single event. At least you should understand, anyone that doesn't quite get it yet, that based on previous events, where we are now is based on past events. And it was determined based on the accumulation of those past events, creating more other previous events up to where we are now. Later and later events that are not previous to me now my now is based on a bunch of previous events. And even if you don't want to understand determinism in psychology and making our own choices, it's based on interaction with environment, cause and effect. And we have to realize the cause and effect we experience now is going to cause something in the future based on the cause and effects that happened in the past, leading up to where we are now, leading up into the future based on uh, whatever it may have been that started off the process. So it's a process, and it's a process that you can't avoid because you're part of the process. And if you did something, it'd still be part of the process. And just because it was going to happen a certain way doesn't mean that happening a certain way carries any weight. it's happening a certain way doesn't mean it was deemed by something special or beyond our comprehension. It just means it was going to happen a certain way. It doesn't give it any super reference or reverence beyond the fact that it was going to happen a certain way. It doesn't mean that we still can't change things in the present. It's about learning from mistakes and understanding those mistakes or whatever it may have been when it comes to sentient experience or whatever it may be. It doesn't deserve any reverence. It doesn't deserve anything more. It just happened a certain way, and it doesn't mean, since it's going to happen a certain way, it doesn't mean that we're not in control of what we're doing right now. Even though we're not, we are in control because the future hasn't happened yet. And that's the part where you have to understand we're still in control of processes that are happening right now. Even though we're not, we're the one living the process right now, and we're the one almost in a way projecting it, but there is something that's going to happen, but it's going to happen based on the things that we're doing right now, that we're not just going to say, oh, if we can't change the future, I might as well just, sit here and do nothing. Well, you sitting there and do nothing is going to therefore change, or not change the future, but affect in the way the future was meant to be. And you can have been differently, but it was going to happen in a different way. But that doesn't mean that I couldn't have convinced you that it could have been different, but it was going to happen the same way no matter what. And that, like I mentioned before, to get back to that same process, just because it's going to happen that same way no matter what, doesn't mean that we're not in control now. Doesn't mean that we should give any extra reference to it, that we can, or it's beyond our control. It's not beyond our control. We have enough control over it to the point to where we can understand the process, even though it's beyond our control, it's not beyond our understanding. And that understanding can be a process that can do for the better, but then again, it's not something we're going to be able to change unless it was meant to happen, but it hasn't meant to happen unless it's already happened. And we can only look back and say that. We can say we can understand it's going to happen a certain way, but we have control over it now, and it's only retrospectively we can understand that that's the way it works based on previous events. So that's the way it works, and it doesn't really work any other way. So, yeah, just because things are okay doesn't mean things couldn't have been a little any better. So yeah, things could have been better, things could have been worse, but they weren't going to happen any other way. But as a projection in your mind that does exist, it couldn't have been better or worse or whatever. You could have been in a different state. Your other states existed based on previous events that you've experienced before. You understand that things can happen a certain way, as things went this way this time and the next way that time, similar circumstances, drawing comparisons, understanding that since you had a previous choice to make and comparing that to the next choice you make, you can realize that there are different changes regardless of the fact that something can't be changed once it's already happened. It's already part of the timeline, and it was going to happen that certain way, but we don't know that. We can only project the understanding that something's going to happen a certain way and have reasonable expectation that something's going to happen a certain way, and beyond that, there's nothing else we can do. But we shouldn't give any extra reference to the idea that we can't change it because we are the process of change, and the process of change only matters because we're part of that process of change. Beyond that, we wouldn't be conscious, and we wouldn't matter because it wouldn't matter because we don't have any feelings to be conscious or react to. There's no sentience or any of that, so it wouldn't matter anyway. So it's all just pointless at that point. It doesn't mean anything if we're not here to experience. So. But yeah, like I was going off based on previous experiences, um, doesn't mean things couldn't have been any any different. But yeah, you can realize based on how you chose this time and that time, that there are different choices to make, and the things based on previous choices you make that were similar, they could have been just the same and better than the choice you make or the choice you were forced into. You went to the cotton candy store this time as opposed to the candy cane store or whatever it may be, and you went to the candy cane store the next time and you realize it was better. I think I would have been in a better situation. We all do this because I like the cotton candy better. But guess what? At least I tried it, and you can get something out of it. You learned a lesson, and you went through the lesson that's you learn constantly through life, only to be presented with another lesson if you're not presented with another lesson. There's nothing to learn, and life's a learning process. And at that point, you might as well say, well, what's the point if there's nothing to learn? So, like, if you're not useful in any way, you wonder, what am I doing here? If I can't be useful, be a slave to the game. So it's either being a slave to the game or not being a slave to the game by not existing or not living anymore. We're saying goodbye, I'm done. And those are the only options we really have. So there's not much else to say except, yeah, that's the game we're playing. So drawing comparisons from previous experiences can be part of the process too. So that's the way it works, I guess. Unfortunately, there's no other way it works. Well, that's the way it happens to work in this game that we're playing. So yeah, there's nothing we can do about it. but we have to try our best to change what we can for the best for the future and such. But we can only do so much. Um, we have to work within the confines of our existence. What's reasonably impossible, we can project and get ourselves upset because we can't reach a conclusion that seems reasonable beyond our psychology, and I'd argue that our psychology is the only thing that really matters. Our brain, our interaction, our physio-psychological state, that's all that really matters. So that's the only thing that really matters, I guess. So, yeah, I suppose so. Anyway, I think that's all I need to say, so, on this subject at least. Um, I guess, that's all I need to say. Just because things are okay now doesn't mean they couldn't have been better, any better, depending on another choice, and it's all about learning that process through mistakes you make. So that's all I need to say in this video. So thank you, and if I have anything else to say, there's always another time and another video to make. So thank you. Until next time. Bye-bye.